Suda51 has never been known for being bashful, and this game is far from an exception. With more gratuitous gore, nudity, and dick jokes than any game I've ever had the guilty pleasure of playing, Shadows of the Damned is certainly not a game I'd recommend bringing home to the wife and kids to enjoy on family night. But I'm going to assume that you don't have a wife, nor kids, and if you do, you certainly don't have fucking family night, right? So in that case, this game is probably for you. Or is it? Well, keep watching and decide for yourself.
Before you die, demon scum, I will carve my name in your flesh. That name is Garcia fucking Hotspur.
You play as Mexican demon hunter extraordinaire Garcia Hotspur, who, upon returning home, finds the love of his life, Paula, hanging from the bedroom ceiling. Now, if this weren't bad enough, Paula's lifeless body begins to spew out demons, and then she's revived, only to get herself dragged to hell by the Demon King Fleming.
Yes, help her! Because in the meantime, I'll be helping myself.
Garcia, like the crazy, clingy bastard that he is, follows her into the underworld where the entire game takes place. From there, Garcia sets out on his very own Robert Rodriguez-inspired road movie, accompanied by Johnson, a floating skull with more multifunctionality than a dozen Swiss Army knives, and who, due in part to his English origin, may remind you of another famous disembodied voice from recent video game history.
I'm not dead!
Now, this may all sound like no laughing matter, but no worries, because before things get too serious, Johnson will always be right there to chime in with a crude and insensitive one-liner to remind you just what game it is that you're playing. You know, it's the same game that features a giant minotaur taking a steaming piss of pure darkness into a fountain. Yeah, that game. As Garcia travels deeper and deeper into the fiery pits of hell, he finds countless copies of his love and is typically forced to watch them die over and over again. Essentially, the plot progression is a lot like Super Mario Bros., where the proverbial princess is always in another castle. That castle, to be exact. Only in this case, it's a lot more dark and twisted, and sports a giant boner.
Now that is a big boner.
The game itself plays a lot like Resident Evil 4, and this should come as no surprise seeing as how Shinji Mikami, the lead director of said game, produced this one. And like RE4, the gameplay here is pretty solid aside from the occasional minor technical flaw. Pulling off headshots on demons always feels satisfying, and you'll be able to do even more damage by upgrading your equipment with red gems you find throughout the game, a feature that has become somewhat of a staple to the genre. Also familiar to the genre are puzzles, albeit fairly rudimentary ones in this case that don't require a whole lot of thought, that break apart some of the action. Taking that one step further, the game also utilizes environmental light and darkness challenges as a means of adding tension and giving some much needed depth to the gameplay. To top this all off are some of the most ridiculously grotesque yet creative bosses I've seen in quite some time. However, taking into consideration how far the genre has come since RE4's release in 2005, in terms of raw gameplay, Shadows of the Damned leaves a lot to be desired. While the bosses themselves are rather inspired, the method for dispatching them isn't. Each boss fight is a rinse and repeat of shoot the red spot blatantly glowing somewhere on their bodies. If this wasn't easy enough, later in the game you'll have access to homing machine gun rounds, which lock onto enemy weak points, making the later enemies and bosses in the game a damn cakewalk. Oh, and by the way, are you a fan of shoot-'em-ups? No? Well, too bad, because towards the end of the game you'll be forced to play through several shoot-'em-up chapters. Now, while these chapters aren't particularly long, as far as shoot-'em-ups are concerned, they're pretty shitty. But really, my biggest gripe with this game is its lack of a New Game Plus feature. It's a solid 10-hour or so experience, but after I beat it, I was kicked back to the main menu desperately craving more. It's disappointing, because as much as I'd like to, without anything giving you an incentive to go back and play aside from wanting to hear your favorite dick jokes over again, I simply can't justify recommending anyone purchase this game at its retail price.
Fuck you!
Ultimately, if you're a fan of Suda51's body of work and or looking for an enjoyable overall gaming experience done in the spirit of 70s grindhouse cinema, then Shadows of the Damned needs to be added to your collection. However, if you're in search of the next great third-person shooting experience, you're going to want to look elsewhere, at least until the price drops about 50%. The bottom line is, like Suda51's many other projects, this one is all about style over substance, and with my craving for more substance aside, I personally loved what it had to offer. Every bloody minute of it, all the way up to its climax.
Magnifico.